Mass Effect Andromeda has gotta take the cake as the biggest game people just wanted to hate this year. The amount of pre-release garbage that this game had to deal with was just on another planet. But was it warranted, and why did it happen? For the record, yes, Andromeda has pretty terrible cutscene animations, some bad writing and cringy dialogue, lots of bugs, and questionable mission design, at least during the early going. However, the combat is fun, multiplayer and the class system flexibility is strong, and the story gets better the further you get through the game. So, it's not all bad with Andromeda. Now, the real problem with how Andromeda was received, however, is another issue entirely, and the subject for today's video. Before I get to my main arguments, I do want to introduce briefly how embargoes work, up into the present. Way back before print media, people bought games in stores knowing absolutely nothing about them. Many people suckered into shitty games by box art alone. Nintendo Power and other video game magazines came to our rescue years later, offering reviews in their magazines, the first real information out there to help us figure out which games to buy. Video game publishers were supplying their games in advance so that those press outlets could have their reviews out before or when the game launched. Other publishers ignored this trend, which is why you see press outlets reviewing some games early and some games after it launches. This is exactly how it exists today, just add in thousands of large YouTubers and websites all clamoring for review codes. Publishers have to make a decision. Do I supply the review code early to the press so that they may play the game in advance and have reviews ready before the game comes out? They also have to decide on another thing though, picking a day, be it the launch day, 3 days beforehand, maybe a week before the game comes out, maybe 2 weeks, to set as the embargo date. The press may only post reviews on that date or after. Now, Mass Effect Andromeda was one of those companies that was very stingy with supplying review copies. They handpicked who would be reviewing the game, which is their right, of course, and they set the embargo date just to a single day before the game would come out. You could probably argue that this was because they wanted to silence critics from reviewing their game without being thrown into the garbage bag list of publishers who enact launch day embargoes. But I think there was another reason for this. Not having a pre-release review can build hysteria with games, often in a very bad way. When the air is silent and people are uncertain, they make their own judgments on the game to substitute for the lack of information coming at them. We often forget that people have already made up their minds about a game before it's even released or reviewed, and furthermore, when a lack of information is present, skepticism builds. Now obviously this doesn't pertain to everybody, but for a lot of people it sure does. It's because people want validation for what they believe in, regardless if they're right or wrong. And they can't when reviews are pushed back all the way or near the game's launch date. Now here's where it gets interesting with Andromeda and Origin Access. The free trial was a way for EA to deal with this in a controlled environment. It's very possible that this was an intentional move by EA to get people more personally hyped for the game. Players couldn't get reviews for Andromeda until the game was practically released, right? So they offered them a monthly subscription service at $5 per month to try the game for 10 hours. Knowing that people didn't have the information they needed to make an informed decision, they knew people would flock to the trial to get their validation. Say what you want about the trial, but I thought it was fairly good. The gameplay was fun, and the missions you could play leading up to the content wall, they made you want more, at least for me. But was EA incentivized to alter the way the game was designed in those first 10 hours to hook people in? Once again, knowing that people were starved for information with Andromeda before its release. In reality, it was very possible that this was all preconceived from EA to earn extra money before the launch of Andromeda. Why else would they include a brand new trial of a game inside Access, a yearly subscription service that they introduced only 1 month ago on February 16th? Many people who signed up for Access will quickly forget about that monthly recurring fee, the innocent little $5, quietly being deducted from their accounts every month. It all adds up after all. And it all makes me wonder if it was intentional to package it with a near launch day review embargo. And under that embargo, no one had the information they needed to make the right decision. So they coughed up the fee for access to make up their own mind about the game, playing the first few highly curated missions and the multiplayer that EA knew was tons more fun than Mass Effect 3's multiplayer. Was it all a hoax to get more money, cover up how the game was for as long as possible, and curate the hell out of the introduction of the game in hopes of appeasing people while they handed over their money? I don't know. And if it was, it backfired for EA. The free trial of Andromeda was also an opportunity for people to flood YouTube with hate-filled content about the game's animation, lip-syncing, or whatever else they could dream up. And they took to the character creators and drafted some hideous-looking writers to slap on shiny new thumbnails to get people to click on their videos. Because the review embargo was pushed back all the way up to the release, YouTube was an open-air breeding ground for people to money grab. And when you're surrounded in negativity, it spreads and infects everything around it. It all turned to hate directed at a game that people hadn't even had a chance to fully experience yet. Now you have to understand how YouTube works to see how this was the case. If a review embargo was set to a week or maybe 2 weeks in advance of the game, like many games are, these hate-filled videos would have had to compete with reviews, and obviously they would have been pushed aside and gotten no viewership. But because there was no reviews out, hysteria broke out instead. People slandered the game to make a quick buck, paranoia spread about how this is the worst game ever, and such is the story of Mass Effect Andromeda. Now, did EA make up for it with those Origin Access subscriptions? We'll never know. This video is not pandering to anyone on YouTube, nor am I defending Andromeda in any way. I enjoy the game amidst its faults, but I do believe that when you look at how the review embargo date and Origin Access trial lined up so conveniently with one another, I'm beginning to think that the perfect shitstorm that happened to Andromeda was at the fault of EA themselves. It seems to me that EA was trying to make a quick buck from consumers with Origin Access by setting the review embargo date so close to the launch of the game, so that anticipating gamers had no choice but to hand over their money to make up their own minds about the game. I think it's a damn shame, to be honest. Andromeda does deserve to be called out for its faults, but it doesn't deserve the whiplashing it got just because YouTube was ripe for the taking during the lull period leading up to the embargo. And that's another thing. Why can't we just have embargoes standardized to 1 week before any game is put out? Pre-release embargoes promote fairness among press outlets and are inherently good for consumers by making sure everybody has access to reviews ahead of time. And it also rewards quality, as the best reviews will push ahead of the trash ones if everyone posts them at the same predefined time. And lastly, it makes for better reviews because people won't have to rush through the game to put out a bargain bin review just for the sake of getting it out on time. But Mass Effect Andromeda is only one example. What do you guys think of all this stuff? Obviously this is just my opinion, so let me know what you guys think down below. And thank you for watching. I'll be posting the schedule for the upcoming week on my Twitter so you can see exactly when I'll be putting out my next videos. And if you enjoyed the video, by all means hit the thumbs up button and subscribe here for more of our future content. And I hope you guys have a kick-ass day.